YouTube vinyl community, Atticus Ross fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about the Atticus Ross soundtrack for Love and Mercy, the movie about Brian Wilson, the life, love, and genius of Brian Wilson, music from and score by Atticus Ross, the movie Love and Mercy. This is a absolutely wonderful movie wonderful in the sense that it's extremely well put together. There was so much love and care and time and effort that went into this movie. Rock and roll documentaries often have this whole approach of the sex, drugs, rock and roll aesthetic, and this movie took a whole different approach. It was an absolute love letter to the creation of art and focusing a lot and bringing attention to mental illness. And especially in someone as creative as Brian Wilson and the mental illness he's suffered through for so long, almost all of his life. This movie was so well put together, and the acting was absolutely incredible. You didn't feel like you were watching John Cusack as Brian Wilson or Paul Giamatti as Dr. Landy. It was a really well done movie, and the acting took you to somewhere else. And Elizabeth Banks' role as Melinda, I think, was absolutely phenomenal. A really, really powerful movie. And a really powerful movie deserves an equally as powerful soundtrack. Atticus Ross has been around for a long time, and he's done a lot of work with Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails. They've done movie soundtracks for like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Social Network, a bunch of other movies. So he's been in and around the music scene for a very long time. And when he was asked to do this soundtrack, at first he was hesitant because you get the idea of what a movie soundtrack will be about. When it comes to a rock star or a rock band or music in general, it has this cheesy, complete tropiness to it that you know exactly what's going to happen. You know about the build-up, you know about the come-downs, you know about all the crap they're going to go through. And so he was very like, no, I'm not doing this. At one point he even said that like most movie soundtracks are, the soundtracks on them are rubbish or garbage or something. Which it's true. I mean, how many movie soundtracks need Sweet Home Alabama on it? Like, we've heard that song a million times. Do we really need it? Does that really make a scene better to have that song in it? So anyway, he ended up reading the script and loved it. He fell in love with this movie and absolutely understood how important the story was and how well researched everything was and how much love and care went into this thing. So he went ahead and said, yeah, I'll do it. And what's really cool about this soundtrack, beyond it having a couple of songs from the Beach Boys on here, a lot of this is kind of like a collage. He wanted to capture the essence of what Brian might be hearing in his head. You know, musical bits and pieces here that eventually become real songs, or just cacophony, maybe sometimes eeriness, sadness, euphoria, emptiness, and he wanted to echo all of that in the music. And so he was given like almost all of the Beach Boys' work, so he can like use bits and pieces of it. And basically, he was inspired by the work of like Danger Mouse with the Grey Album, or even like the Beatles' Love soundtrack, because that's all split up with different pieces of songs here and there. And he made this like collage. So he would take bits and pieces of Beach Boys music, either unreleased stuff or released stuff, and then combine his own score on top of it, and created this whole world, this whole landscape, which echoes what Brian was doing with his own music. So it doesn't come across as cheesy or a tribute at all. It comes across as inspired by. And that's when the best art comes out, I think. Sorry for my voice there. It just really hit me, They worked on this thing for about half a year. And I think what's really cool about it is that at one point he said that he would spend like a week working on something that would flash across the screen within seconds. So, I mean, a lot of attention and detail went into this thing. So I'm a big fan of it myself. The artwork on this thing is just absolutely incredible. I love this album cover. Very, very cool to look at. Back is a picture of Paul Dano and the track listing. And the inside, I think, is great too. It's got a picture of Brian with the guys playing the Beach Boys in the movie, and there's Paul Dano solo on his own. And then you got the songs themselves listing off the bits that he used throughout the songs. The samples that he used from the actual albums. The vinyl itself, I think, is super cool. It's on this really, really nice, bright blue, ocean blue vinyl. Pacific Ocean blue vinyl. Really, really think that's cool. And it's one of those things where like when you open it up, you're surprised by how blue it is. The video probably doesn't do it total justice, but it's pretty blue. The record came out as a Record Store Day exclusive, I think in 2015. I remember getting it around that time, I believe. And it wasn't exactly the easiest thing to find either, but it was one of those things where like I had to have it. So, the original soundtrack on CD came out in August of 2015, and then this came out for Record Store Day. Let's just jump into it. So the first song on here, The Black Hole, this is basically like the intro to the album and the intro to the movie as well, where it kind of shows the guys up on stage, like Ed Sullivan era Beach Boys in their striped shirts and stuff. It kind of just like fades in. You get bits and pieces of a lot of Beach Boys songs like Fun Fun Fun, Denny's Drums, a handful of others. Kind of creating this world, like a real quick snapshot that builds and builds and builds and then jumps into Don't Worry Baby, which is kind of a cool transition to hear. And this is what I like about the soundtrack, is that there are a few Beach Boys songs sprinkled on it, but they didn't go for the cheesy, just load up with the hits, throw it out there, let people buy it. That's the easy way out, and it's been done to death so many times. Like, we don't need another Beach Boys Greatest Hits album. We just don't. So, right off the bat, I like what they've done with this package. Don't Worry Baby, what's there to say? I mean, it's one of the best pop songs of all time. I think I'm going to save an actual review if I want to do the album it's on, and not jump into it now, because we love that song. Silhouette, another Atticus Ross track. This is like a really brooding, ominous, guttural growl to it that continues to grow throughout the track. It's got this feeling of like impending doom and uncertainty. And I also feel like there was like a swimming barrage of negativity that kind of like sleepishly and delicately falls. That kind of is like a leaf or a feather, kind of like gently falling onto this cascading river that you can't hear. You can watch the river and you can see it like whitecapping and being quite violent as it goes downstream. But that leaf is so gently falling into that river and just breezing over the top of it. And I almost feel like that's an analogy for maybe how Brian felt with his own mental health and being surrounded by this world where he was putting so much of himself into it. Then you get God Only Knows. This is Paul Dano basically doing like a demo version of the song where he's showing Murray, the guy who plays Murray in the movie. He's showing how the song's going to go. And it's cool because it shows basically how a song does work when you write a song. It starts off maybe a little bit easy, basic, a couple of chords here and there, a guide vocal, and then it builds up as you do it. So as he plays the song, the chords get fleshed out, the timing gets a little better, his singing kind of mellows into an actual groove. So that's pretty cool to hear, like the transition on a made-up demo of a song. And then you get the actual song, God Only Knows, which again, I'll save for a Pet Sounds review someday in the year 2020. And then the last song on side 1, Believe. This was a really, really trippy song. I like this one a lot. Really dreamy, had like a yearning quality, super introspective, and a little lost. It's got this wandering blindly in the dark feeling, with no real thoughts of how to move forward. Maybe the emptiness gives off the impression of a vacant area, this big open landscape, but you don't know where to go in that landscape. It's open and it's there and you can go, but you don't know how to. There's a big feeling of like running throughout one point where it sounds like drums or maybe some clapping or some bongos create this feeling of running. But like you're running into bleak nothingness. You're kind of just going nowhere. It's kind of like that Scooby-Doo sound where they kind of, then you take off with a bunch of smoke behind them. It's kind of like that feel to it. The cellos and the really like numb piano augment this thing to give it a real distant feel. There's even like a little bit of feedback that happens once in a while that creates an eeriness, like a spacey quality to it. There's also like a heartbeat feeling to it, which I think creates like that anxiety that you feel, or maybe that Brian would have felt during this time, dealing with maybe the drugs he was doing and his own mental illness, and trying to create art and trying to convince his friends and his bandmates that what he was making was important and really good. But at the end, there's almost like no resolve. It just kind of ends. which is also fitting because maybe that's how he felt. There was no resolve at that point. There was no answer. There was no doctor. There was no one to say, "Hey, I think you got something going on here, man." Side two opens with "Good Vibrations." What? What do you say about "Good Vibrations," man? It's one of the best pop songs of all time. Again, let's jump over that one for now. Losing It has this like eerie wind blowing feel, this atmosphere of a cold, slow building storm that abruptly changes into like the god awful dinnerware scene where it's just like that syncopated silverware on plates sound, which is like if you don't know what misophonia is, look up misophonia because that sound can instantly just bring you to tears with how awful it is. Um, yeah, screw that. I'm Right Here. It's an ironic name because this song is so vacant and disassociated. There's a hint of melody throughout this thing, and we hear glimpses of Brian's voice from Don't Talk throughout this thing. And I should mention, each of these songs have bits and pieces of Beach Boys music sprinkled throughout. The album tells you which one's which, and it's fun to hear them. You kind of guess, what's coming up next, or pick out bits and pieces and be like, oh yeah, that's Don't Talk, or that's Fun Fun Fun, or whatever it is. Um, yeah, it's an ironic name for a song, and there's a big slow build to eventually hearing Paul Giamatti's voice, kind of like talking down to Brian at some point. It's got a really like dizzying carousel effect also at the end. The Bed Montage. This song is an absolute masterpiece, if you ask me. And calling it the Bed Montage is perfect. One, because in the scene, in the movie, he is in his bed when this happens. And two, because classic Brian Wilson. You picture him in the early 70s in his bed, that big myth of him never leaving his room for 3 years, Um, this song is so depressive, and they have this like really drenched version of In My Room, almost like a sludgy acid version of In My Room, which is eerie because you take something known to be happy and syrupy, and then you take that and put it into a not druggy context, but like just a depressive at the end of your rope context, and that juxtaposition is freaky. Um, there's like panic-stricken moments throughout this track, especially with like the voices. The voices are creepy. If you play this at night by yourself, that voices part is freaky, man. And then Till I Die creeps in. And I can spend a long time talking about Till I Die because that's a very, very beautiful, tender, and extremely heartbreaking song. And sums up how Brian was feeling for a long time. Um, he wrote that song in 1969. It didn't come out for a couple of years later on the Surf's Up album. But that song is so, thinking of yourself as so small in this humongous world. I'm a leaf on a windy day. Pretty soon I'll be blown away. How long does the wind blow? Well, until I die. I mean, it's a dark, dark song. And then they use this version of it where it's almost a cappella for a long time. And you get this, like, the ending bits of just Mike's vocal. And it's haunting. It's absolutely haunting. Um, yeah. Amazing track. Absolutely amazing track. Intersection is a song that has like a tinge of optimism. Finally, there's like a ray of hope. I mean, it's a very tiny tunnel, a very tiny hole in this very tiny tunnel where you see like a speck of light somewhere at the end. But it's there. That light at the end of the tunnel is there, and I think that's Brian's realization and saving in the 80s when basically Melinda saved him from Dr. Landy and got him the help that he needed and showed him that there was hope and help, and he wasn't alone, and this wasn't going to be the rest of his life. Then you get a live version of Love and Mercy from 2002. It comes in right at the end of Intersection, and there's a thunderous applause at the end of this version. It's one of those times, especially in the movie, that's extremely effective, because you spend the whole time watching the movie with Paul Dano and John Cusack, and then all of a sudden you see the real Brian Wilson, and you're like, oh my god, we just watched this guy's story. There he is. He's a survivor. He did it. Love and Mercy to You and Your Friends Tonight. I mean, unbelievable. And then One Kind of Love is a song he wrote for this movie that they play over the sound, over the credits. It's a great melody. It's well sung. It's got a good message about falling in love and having years of heartbreak and then finding the person you're supposed to be with. Which could be about a person. It could be about finding love within yourself and appreciating who you are, which is important. And Brian sings it really well. It's super catchy. It's syrupy, but it's really, really beautiful. It's a wonderful song, and that French horn really steals the show on it, if you ask me. Um, so that's kind of how I feel about this album. I think it's extremely well put together. I think it's a perfect augment to the movie. Even if you haven't seen the movie, I think this soundtrack on its own would be evocative enough of the things that he went through and the feelings he may have gone through, because we'll never know exactly what it was like to be inside his head, but you can get the feeling of that through this album. So yeah, I'd easily give this thing like a 9 out of 10. I think it's absolutely amazing and very well done with love. There are extra songs that were sprinkled throughout the movie, more sound collages, but for the soundtracks, they kind of scaled that down a bit and kind of made a more condensed greatest hits version of it, for lack of a better term, which I think works really well for what they were trying to do. So yeah, this is it. This is Brian. I've been covering up the logo the whole time there, but Brian Wilson, the life and love and genius of Brian Wilson. Music from the soundtrack Love and Mercy by Atticus Ross. Yeah, I'd give it a 9 out of 10. No problem. So yeah, that's it. My name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews with Atticus Ross and Love and Mercy. Thank you, Brian. And yeah, see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and let's chat about this thing. Let's chat about the movie. All right.